2 on October 1st, 2014. First, just some ground rules. While it is a work session and is designed to be a little more informal, I want to remind all board members that we will follow normal rules. Please be recognized by the chair before we speak. And we left off at the water fund. I think the easiest thing to do is to just go right down the line and ask any additional questions that you have on the water fund before we would be prepared to move to the wastewater fund. So, Lynn, I'll start with you. Anything in the water fund that you want to discuss, you're wide open to. I think we'll just let you, go through and ask any questions that you may have and get those asked and answered, and we'll just move right down the line.
Actually, a lot of my questions got answered last night.
You can always reserve the right to come back. I mean, it's not like this is your one opportunity,
Oh, thank you. Totally forgot about that. Yep, yeah. Those, on the water part, we covered a lot of that last night. The improvements and the replacement comments I had, 5% rate. I charted what it was going to cost me, just to give you a perspective, because I don't know what some of the other businesses are going to deal with. It's going to be about $50 more a month for me, just for the water. I haven't looked at sewer yet, and that's just off the top of my head. So somebody that's a high water user, I average, for the first 7 months, I'm averaging 67,000 gallons. A high month for me will be 140,000. Low month might be 40,000. But this year we've been a lot busier. So that just kind of might put it in perspective for you. My bills run, almost 2,000. 18, if you add the debt costs in there too. So who'd you say was the high water? Was Lost Creek, I think you said?
Yes.
I don't know what their volume is, but 600 a year for me isn't going to kill me, but that's quite a few rooms extra. So for them, I don't know if they just raise their rent, probably. I don't know how that works.
I don't know what they do.
But those are the issues.
As I discussed last night, though, even with the increase, their bill is going to be going down drastically because they were paying for
That's true, yeah, with the
water.
leak. Okay.
Running into the ground.
Okay. No, I'm good, at least for now, unless somebody else comes up with something that I don't understand.
Okay, Ernie?
I'm pretty well, just to follow up on Lost Creek, when George was here, we were talking about that one-time number of years ago, water came up and he says, we just pass it on to the customers there. So whatever we increase here is passed on to the residents over there, maybe not right away, but eventually they will get it. I think most of my questions have been answered, and that, I think the biggest thing that's going to have to still be resolved is manpower. Other than that, most of my questions have been answered in that. Because I looked at one thing, where was it here? Water system replacement costs, vehicles. Are we planning on any new vehicles this coming year?
This coming year, yeah, probably one more.
One more.
But basically what happens there is the replacement part, it gets updated annually by Lois. So in other words, this year we purchased 2 new ones. So now they are plugged into the replacement. So in other words, we don't budget, $30,000 a year for a truck, It's like a total cost.
Because I know I'm looking at replacement costs, 7 years, useful life, 7 years, trying to figure out where we're at on that time frame.
Let's see. Well, we're always in the middle of it, like I said. It just gets updated every year.
Okay. Something may come up, but right now, I'm pretty well set.
Okay. Clerk Rattari?
The only question I have is, for water sales from last year, how far are we below? Because I know it's been a cool, wet summer. We had the winter freeze situation where we had a lot of let runs. Well, it's not as many as our neighbor, but we did have some. I think I did talk to Lois about this, and it will probably be on your financials coming up in the next board packet or the next two, but we're about $20,000 below last year's sales, Lois?
Yes, that's on the sheet that I just gave.
Okay, so it's on this sheet, okay. So, that's just to take in mind, and, you know, the weather, well, everyone knows the summer wasn't that great this year, so it was a cool, wet summer. And, that isn't good for water sales, because I didn't have to water my grass one time this year.
I never did mine yet either.
That's all I have, I'm satisfied.
Okay. Trustee Pompo?
Can you tell me, because I know this, we've probably gone over this before, what's the total water, how many people do we have on the total water system, I guess?
1107 is the number of bills that go out, right?
That sounds about right. I think we're closer to
1,100, about
1,200.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
One other thing, just a comment on the problems of trying to catch up with everything that you have going on with the manpower and everything else. Is it a possibility to, and I don't know how much manpower it takes to do this, but the hydrants, actually flushing the hydrants, cleaning the hydrants, painting the hydrants, and all that kind of stuff is a annual thing. I'm assuming we have to flush the hydrants every year, I would think.
Well, actually, the flushing is not necessarily annual anymore. About 3 years ago, we switched to a unidirectional flushing, which is like a comprehensive from the source to the end.
Mhm.
And it involves valving off, so achieving, certain velocities. Before that, it was more or less an annual or on every time somebody complained. It was basically just flushing dead ends, okay?
Actually-
Flushing dead ends is flushing dead ends.
Right.
All that does is waste time and money. But I mean, if people complain about it, obviously, we're gonna respond.
Right.
But now it's based on, like I said, it's pretty comprehensive, so if we do, and actually, since we've done that, we haven't had any complaints.
Mhm.
So I don't know if the people just stop complaining, or I think it's just better water, so.
Well, the only reason I said.
But the painting is a good example of something that's not getting done.
Well, the only reason I bring this up is because I know in the city, the city fire department flushes the hydrants. And
Right.
maintains the hydrants, so it's just a possibility that our fire department could do the same thing in the summertime, I'm sure. We have the manpower probably to go out there and, that'd save you whatever time it is to do that.
Sure.
It's just a possibility.
Well, like I said, painting is the main thing that doesn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
Or recently, it hasn't been done. Which,
Okay.
again, is not affecting the operation of the hydrant, but it's the kind of thing it's visible and,
Yeah, looks
know.
good. So,
Trustee LaRue?
No, I think we covered everything, the reasons why the electricity and gas, I think we covered almost everything that I had questions on with them.
Okay. Diana, while you're settling in there, what I started to do is since we were still on the water fund from last night, decided to run right down the line and see if there were any lingering questions on the water fund before we moved on to wastewater. And your arrival was timely because we just finished up with everybody. And so if there are any lingering questions that you have on the water fund before we move on.
Nope.
Okay?
I actually have one more.
Sure.
That I was thinking. Last time I ran into Bob Sims, I, in passing, asked him how his water pressure was, because he had talked about that, I think, a year or two ago, and he said it's the same. So I'm wondering if that's a project that's in the works that it just hasn't gotten looked at yet, or if it's just his house, or because he's at the end.
No, it's
or-
not his house, it's an area, and we have looked at it. And it's not on a project list, but it will be something
Still working, Kirk, you're fine.
Basically, we've got a number of different pressure districts, and I have to basically realign a pressure district, so put his neighborhood into another pressure district.
So
which is-
he's not the only one then, or is it
Oh,
just
right,
because he's
yeah,
at the end?
yeah.
Okay,
It's not a person.
okay.
So the problem we've got is, I'm sure you all can tell that we've got lots of different elevations in the township. So basically, each storage tank is the supply for a district. And then we've even got sub-districts. So for example, the Cox Tank District is basically Trowbridge Park, okay? And we've got sub-districts, so we've actually got 2 districts. And the problem is, down at the low end, okay, of the elevation is where your high pressure is going to be. So without pressure reducing valves, we have, at the low end of Trowbridge, we've got 125 PSI, which is way too much pressure. But the problem is, of course, to regulate it back to 100, which is basically where it is now, that means everybody else in the upper district has to, go up, or down, I should say, 25 PSI, which is still, in that particular area, it's like 50, mid-50s, which is definitely adequate, but, it could be higher. But basically, it's a project. I'd have to remove an existing pressure reducing valve and install a new pressure reducing valve at a different location. So that's,
Is that a big job? Because you said it's not part of these, right? Because
right. Yeah, it's not a huge job, but it's a job that, it's not like a routine kind of a job. It's something that have to be contracted out, get engineered, so, and then get the work done.
is that on the scope at all, or?
Yeah, it's not a high priority because, it's not, the pressure's adequate. We got other areas that are, where the pressure's even lower. But if it's low, there's not much I can do about it, Although we do have a few residences that are close to, like up in Chapel Ridge, for example, that are too close to the tank, so there's very little pressure. They actually, with a permit, basically pump, it goes into a tank, and then they pump out of the tank for pressure. So we're fairly unique in that respect. Marquette's kind of like that too, but our area size, is just as large as the city of Marquette, and we have just, as many, if not more, pressure districts. I know we've got more storage tanks than the city does, so I'm assuming we've got more pressure districts as well.
Thanks.
Is that it, Lynn?
Yes, thanks.
Any other questions from the water fund? Randy?
There's just one other item on that as well. One of the reasons that we retained the portion of Ryan's Avenue that we did, and we tried to purchase the other portion up there, is so we would have the ability to loop those. They're not connected, they're dead ends at this point, so if we can ever get to the point of looping those lines, that would help solve that problem as well. Connecting them that way, following that Ryan's Avenue right of way that we have.
Right, and that's a more costly project, and that's actually, it wouldn't really affect necessarily Sims pressure. What they would do is increase the fire flows, because there's no question that dead ends, no matter where they're located, no matter what the pressure is, you're going to have your lowest fire flow on dead ends. So that's why they could be connected.
Okay.
That would definitely be an improvement.
That makes
But that's
sense.
even more costly than, putting in removing a PRV and adding a new PRV. Because basically you're talking connecting mains. And basically the east end of Trowbridge and the west end of Trowbridge, they're all dead ends, so which ones do you pick and choose?
Mhm.
And we've got another, actually, there's a new situation that was pointed out in last year's reliability study, which is what we really need is like a new transmission main, which would be basically down Ontario. Okay, and that's that's a
Major.
pretty big project there.
So it'd go down Ontario and then go out to all.
Right, so it'd be
Yeah.
replacing, the biggest main we got right now in Trowbridge is basically smaller mains, mostly 6-inch, and some 8-inch, but it really should be like a 12-inch. So.
Ready?
The larger mains are actually only in the, you know, the basically west of Trowbridge and 41.
And they're probably newer,
They're adequately sized,
yeah.
so.
Just to follow up on transmission main on Ontario. Now, is that something that's being thought about? Because if I remember right, the county's gonna redo that road in 16, are they not? So,
That's something that has never been on the radar until recently. Could definitely be looked at, and I've already got an issue with, I mean, it's not an issue, but obviously, there are gonna be a lot of road improvements. And I have to match up my proposed improvements with the road improvements.
that I understand, so.
So, for example, you know, the sewers I'm trying to get completed would be one. Vandenboom Road, and, you know, I've actually, you approved this year an update to the, we've got actually some preliminary engineering now for South Vandenboom and east end of Grove Street and Grandview Circle. Before we knew needs existed in terms of sewer in particular, and water, but it was only kind of a general overview. We took a closer look, like exactly what it's going to cost, and you know, different options to achieve the service level, and basically that's another example. The top of Vanderbilt is the end of the Cox District, so there's very, very little fire flow, and that serves Whetstone. Okay, so again, that needs to be connected to the Grove Street main, and that would also be putting us into two different districts, not only pressure districts but water supply districts. So we'd have surface water district, groundwater district, and different pressure districts. So that would have to be engineered and then constructed. And then same thing with the sewer. Okay, basically my goal would be to not necessarily sewer the whole township, but we've definitely got areas that have already got need, okay, where you have a population density, Thurwich Park primarily. But we've also got other areas, basically the border areas. So Vandenboom, East End of Grove would be one example. Wright Street, we've already got, that's another border area between the city and Marquette. East Avenue is another one. Those we've already dealt with, but we still got these other areas. I mean, it's just like any kind of border between tribes, municipalities, religions. You've got this line where people on one side of the line get one level of service, people on the other side of the line get a different level of service. So I like to at least equalize those, you know, so, you know, it just creates, it's just a bad situation in my opinion to have those borders like that, you know. I mean, they exist, they're there. All I'm saying is Marquette Township's got a huge amount of rural residential zoning, okay, that's fine. But it butts right up to urban zoning. So there has to be some kind of transitional area where, and plus Vanderbilt, for example, there's going to be a large parcel that's going to be someday, the owner's in their 90s, so you know, someday it's going to be available for development. And we don't have adequate services.
I have a question for you, Kirk. It has to do with the rate study that we do every few years. What year is that due again to do?
Actually, 2015.
Okay.
That's a joint study
Yep.
with the city.
Okay. Dan?
Concerning the phase 2 that we're working on here in South Vanderboom, I'm sorry, not North Vanderboom, that what
Yeah.
we're doing here now. How much is left out of that whole area, so that whole,
Well, yeah, it's still going to be 2 more phases, and actually, we're getting, this is the biggest phase. Phase 1 was pretty small, just a couple blocks, and this one is going to be the biggest one. But basically, we have to we have expanded a little bit. We have to catch basically the east half of Center Street is going to be the next phase, hopefully. And that was originally going to be phase 1, but the demand was in other areas, so, and then basically Huron Street would be phase 4.
do you have any?
And then the
idea-
connector side streets.
So then we'll basically all of Main Trowbridge. will be-
Yes,
Do you have any idea when we're looking at time frame for that?
yeah, my goal is phase 3 next year, phase 4 the
Following
following year.
year? Okay.
I mean, I mentioned before, I'm getting calls from people, and I'm still getting calls, but we've had to stop. In fact, I got one just yesterday.
And, and that's also being coordinated with the road project, because remember, we're doing all the roads over 3 years if the voters approve it.
And he's got to keep ahead of that.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll
there's
be
got to
ready
be some.
for it at the time that
Guys.
the roads are opened up.
Remember to be recognized before you start.
Because I'm just assuming, because I know Center's Street is not a good street. That's probably when it's going
Right.
to be in one of the, so I would
And
assume that
that's
we
high
would
on
finish
both
up
the road list and the sewer list as well.
prior to the start of the repair center, we would
Yep.
have that one. Or along with the repair to center.
Right.
Done, Dan? Anyone else?
Yeah, gonna follow up.
Go ahead.
I know when they started talking about the road project, that was one of the things that even at the planning level, we were saying about you being involved in how that was gonna come together. So I'm assuming, is it safe to assume, because I've gotten in trouble this week for doing that, that you've accounted for at least next year's stuff in this budget when you were doing it, because it was kind of the same time frame of having all the meetings and all the information and asking for the
Well,
millage.
right. I haven't really changed the budget because I've got.
Because of that, I mean, for the project?
Right. What happens is, if you look at the improvement schedule, and I separated that out from the replacement because in the budget, it's just one line, replacement and improvement. So I've broken that out into 2 categories. And that hasn't really changed other than, because I'm funding it long-term. But obviously, I don't do a whole project in any given year. I mean, I might do a whole project, but it won't be,
Funded?
correct.
In the whole year?
So that's why, it gets kind of complicated, and it's really a lowest question how that happens exactly. But basically, I do have a pot of money that's funded per that schedule. That's assuming that, the board approves the budget. But money comes out, like, for example, the sewer replacement and improvement fund. The contingency fund went first, and then the next one was replacement and improvement. So last year, in the water replacement and improvement, it wasn't funded at the normal level. So, but we still have, I try to keep pace with other people's schedules as much as I can. I'm not going to say it's going to work out 100%, but I'm assuming that there's also a possibility of altering the road schedule.
So basically, that made it a lot clearer now, the way you explain that. So basically, right now, this budget doesn't have anything to do with the road millage if that goes through, right?
Right.
But then you would figure for the next.
Right.
If this happens, 15, 20, whatever, however this works out,
Right.
that's when you
Yep.
put it together, okay.
Yeah.
That it? Ernie?
Follow up a little bit. If the millage passes and they proceed at an accelerated rate to start working on the roads, then dollars are gonna have to be there for you so that you can do whatever you have to do with sewer and water at that point in time. So you
Right.
may have to take it out of some of your investments and everything else at the time being to do that, which you have some, but you also have to worry about unexpected emergencies too, so.
Right.
It's gonna be a give and take when you come down to it.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And it's a team effort. I mean, it's not like, I'm doing my thing and the road commission's doing their thing. you know, everybody, you know, tries to plan and work together. You know, that's,
Now, will this be, we've been talking about water, but you're also gonna be talking about sewer and water in some of these places and roads at the same time in that too. so-
right. And there are going to be some cases where, you know, we'll be doing what we've done in the past, which is we've got water and sewer already. But in the case of the water, if there's like a complete reconstruct, like Werner Street, Fair Avenue, east end of Fair Avenue, Ontario, part of Ontario, we did this too. Even though I might have water, I would replace the hydrants and the valves, which are the two items that, you know, age, and I don't just go out there and replace valves and hydrants unless, you know, there's a road project.
Is there any type of grants available for replacement, these old systems and that we can, it's late in the ballgame because it takes time for these grants to work all the way through.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's still, and it's a changeable picture every year, but the ones that we've used in the past, still the main one, the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. There is a new fund that I believe it's going to be passed. It has to do with financing, so that and again, it's going to be a federal funded thing, but where the states can lump together groups of smaller projects to be able to get, you know, a bigger slice of pie from the feds. And then it'll be another revolving fund. But the theory behind it, if it gets passed, and I don't know that it has been passed yet, would be to just make it available to more, you know, to more communities. Right now, it's generally based on need, so it gets pretty competitive. And like I said, it's a changing picture every year. Just depends on who gets selected, and you know, there are different factions that are, you know, some people are opposed to, you know, any kind of environmental, you know, type projects, which is, I mean, drinking water and wastewater collection and treatment. I mean, it seems like basic stuff, but there are people that actually say, you know, we shouldn't be spending any money on that.
Because I know, looking at your investments and your cash, and water is about 650, and sewer is about 1.6. That'll be eaten up awful quick if you have to come with an aggressive program to have to meet up with the roads and that.
Well, right. And another thing that's changed is, you know, since we did not take that last grant offer, you know, we're basically self-funding everything now. So it's not like I can go out and spend millions of dollars, but I can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know. And if you look, the numbers you just mentioned, I think they've been fairly stable over the years.
They have been for the last year.
And we've had some, you know, pretty big projects, relatively speaking.
Even during the winter, that there wasn't a lot of variation
Yeah.
in there.
But if I get up much over like the $500,000 mark, it's that might be a little, I'd be a little bit more cautious about that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move to wastewater, which is the tab immediately prior to in your book. And I think to start it off, we'll do the exact same thing we started this meeting with, and we'll go down to your end, Lynn, and feel free to take us wherever you want to take us in the wastewater fund, whether it's a narrative or repairs, improvements, and we'll follow along.
I would like to maybe type up a recommendation as a compromise maybe for next year on how I would like to see some of this changed. If it's possible, great, and if it's not, as far as presenting it to us, that I think might help some of my questions, be able to understand it better. My main question kind of again falls back to the road project. So, and you touched on it just a little bit about, I had a vision of a Senate committee meeting. I felt like I was on a Senate board for a minute. How much of the road repair millage, if that goes through, ends up being wastewater related? Or are your projects pretty much going to be water sided? Because there's a difference in what you're looking for as far as increases between the two departments.
Percentage-wise, I haven't looked at it precisely, but it's going to be both.
Okay,
gonna be
real,
both.
right down the line.
Yeah. Now, some of the stuff is not necessarily road-related. I mean, that's basically just going to impact if we've got main projects. But things like, the generators, for example. In the wastewater side, the Center Street lift station, that's going to need a generator here. Basically, we've got an alternative type system. We've got like an overflow wet well. We've got a bypass pump. So it was designed so that we would have time, from if the level gets so high, to go out there with our pump. Then we got to drag hose out and, bypass. And we've actually done that. It's not a big deal. But again, the DEQ, when we got permitted, started getting permitted for the Trowbridge project, which is basically, if you recall, initially, it was going to be basically 50-50, Cornerstone or Cedarville and Trowbridge Park. Cedarville's been building like crazy. We have only just begun, and hopefully we'll end in a couple of years. But the deal was, once Trowbridge started developing, that's a point where we need to go with a generator, which is in the schedule here. So that's probably going to happen next year. But that wouldn't impact any roads. That'd be strictly on
Be a
site.
separate project.
Yeah. So it'd only be like basically the main extensions, the identified projects. And I haven't actually overlaid that with the road project, but I'll have to do that soon. Yeah, and we've had, we're complete now, but, we had that major wastewater treatment plant upgrade. And obviously, that's the kind of thing that wouldn't impact the roads as well. We still have more work to do on our interceptor, but again, that's not going to impact our roads. It might impact somebody else's roads, but
So there aren't any big improvements with the wastewater facility too then that had to, because we just had
No.
a price adjustment to that or a contribution adjustment?
right.
Okay. No, I think I'm good on that, on wastewater.
Diana?
I'm good.
Treasurer Johnson?
Okay, I think I'm coming up to some of the things that Lynn talked about too. One thing that we're gonna have in the future, when we get to the rates, is 24 cents justification for that, because the minute the residents see that, you're gonna see a lot of complaints real quick in that. Why so much in that? It's not gonna be much for myself per month, maybe $1, $1.50, so it isn't a great amount, so. According to my wife, everything I pay is too much in that too, so. Okay, the one thing on the debt service fee, especially the one that we've been decreasing, it's now at $5.50 and $5.25. And we did that in 2012. It was $6.50.
Right, yeah. Again, that's, I'm not proposing a change in that yet.
I know that. I'm just asking, is there sufficient, when we originally looked at that and it was originally passed, each year we look at it to see if the balance was such that you could decrease it.
Right, yeah, yeah,
And it still is not at that point yet where we can decrease it.
correct. Again, that's based on, that's only going to happen as we get new customers. Okay, so every year I look at that, and it's equivalent customers. So, like a Walmart might equal, 200 single-family homes. But that's in the the rate schedule. So that, if you notice a debt service, it's an increasing scale, okay?
It's
But,
really it's
but
revenue,
we've kind of tapered off, you know.
it's revenue generated. As you generate more
Yeah.
revenue, it can go down.
And actually, I was talking to the billing clerk today about that. We've actually recently lost a couple of big, you know, customers. Bonanza and Penny's, J.C. Penney's. I mean, they're right now just vacant buildings. So
See, pennies would a little bit, but Bonanza,
they'll redevelop. And we've had that in the past where businesses leave, something new comes in. And the new stuff looks like it may be picking up. So far, we haven't actually had any actual hookups yet, but the dental clinic, for example, did pay for their permits just recently, so that will be happening. And the gas station, they haven't paid for the permits, but they are on the site working, so that will happen.
I think the one thing that, when I went through, and I went through it twice, and I went back each time, that the system we have on US 41, we spent 60-some thousand dollars. We still have another, according to your figure, 93,000 in that, and because that being the major system for everything going down to the wastewater plant.
Right, yeah.
I'm just wondering when time frame to do the rest, because I don't want that to come into an emergency situation.
Right. The first project that we had was the most critical in terms of, it was just a bad situation that was, you know, it was a field decision and there was really not a lot they could do, but we had a situation where one of the overpasses, okay, the sewer went through, okay, the main, but the main was, they had bored, okay, and so the pipe was in, you know, board casing. It was right next to a stream. The manhole had a gas main going through it, okay, and there was high bedrock. So that was a situation that was pretty critical, okay. The other ones are more like spot repairs, kind of scattered out. Things like bad connections, you know, where and the problem was we weren't able to control it because it was, even though we owned the main, we couldn't, you know, disallow any city properties not to connect to it, you know, so, you know, in the past, there have been cases where it was much more common for contractors, it would typically be maybe just plumbers, to actually make hammer connections where they just hammer a hole and, you know, stick a pipe in. Just a couple of those, so.
But that's,
It's still on the radar. Whenever we get a chance to get it together.
I think the other thing, next thing is the treatment plant itself. You talk about the flow has been decreased in that, and the demand from our side of it. Now, the
Right.
question I have is that in the past, when we have not had, our flow has not been up to where they budgeted for it, because they have their own budget, and they're looking at income. And the income isn't there, they make an adjustment, which means all the users have to pay additional dollars. We've
Right,
done
yeah,
that before.
yep.
So,
And that's the way it is. It's so.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's an estimated. There's a budget. I mean, it's a budget that's actually approved. The advisory board has to approve it, but basically it's the city. It goes from us to the city, and they make the final approval because they're, by contract, they're the operators. You know, which includes, you know, paying for everything basically. I mean, which we pay for, but. It's, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, it's estimated what the costs are going to be, but if they're different, then we pay the difference.
I know one year we got $40-some thousand bill on it.
Yep.
So,
There's something we struggle with, but I mean, it's like, the bottom line is we pay whatever it is. I mean, you know.
right, so when we say there could be a budget adjustment because we're not using that much, it could be the other way around, too.
Right. This year was a little different. There was a little bit of concern because you know, everything's based on metered flow. Well, because everybody was, especially in the city, was, just running water. Okay, so the flows actually increased, but, they weren't paying for it. The customers weren't paying for it. So what they try to do is try to figure out what exactly is the flow going to be. And then there's actually two parts. There's like the flow cost and then the demand cost. The demand costs are mainly the the debt, but we know what that's going to be. But there are other things that are not strictly related to what it costs to treat the wastewater.
The reason, just looking at the actual through June, was 60,000, the flow costs in that. And you're budgeting 92,000. And if you double that, you've got 120, and you're projecting this year 174, which is not anywhere near it. So I'm just concerned with our flow costs being down, and all of a sudden it is meeting their budget there, and all of a sudden we get an additional.
Well, yeah, and actually, this year, everything was done earlier than normal. I mean, basically, we were a month early. So, Lois handed out like an update, like through August, the actual expenses through August. Okay, the budget that we were working with was through June. And I just paid the bills today, or signed off on some bills, and there are changes, some of them pretty sizable. For example, in the water main repair and maintenance line. I've already, I just got the bill for the 41 job, which was $9,000. Okay, so that was, obviously I'm already going to be under budget for next year. Same thing with the the wastewater plant. When I did the budget, we hadn't actually arrived at our final recommended number, and so it's again, it's estimated. It might be different, but
I'll let someone else question. Put it 6, so let's move down the line and not come back.
Clerk Letari.
It's not a question, it'll be comments, because I pumped the water that ended up going to the wastewater plant. From the end of January to about the middle of May, or early May, we were pumping 1 million gallons extra every day. So that was 1 million gallons extra of wastewater treatment that no one's recovering for, at least as of now. And I don't know how much portion of that was ours, but it was, I think, is the city gonna get some reimbursement for that, Kirk, possibly?
no,
They are not.
no. In fact, we just got the at your next meeting, you'll be having to pass a resolution. We're applying for what's it
Section
called,
19.
Section 19, which
Yeah.
is state emergency funding. And that also will not include costs related to lead runs.
Okay. So I just wanted to make the board aware of, how much extra they had to treat this year, in the first few months of the year due to the winter freeze.
Yeah, what we ended up doing there was obviously this year's number was not like a real number. I mean, there was water coming through, but it was clean water. Okay, so
It's clean, but you still have to treat it.
right, and it just makes it more difficult to calculate, I would imagine. But you're still, only treating the contaminants, okay, the solids, and So anyway, my point is, what we ended up doing is going back for a 3-year average, which is what I had to do in our budget for forecasting for next year, because the numbers were so much different the last 3 years.
And I guess I do have one question on our sewer project. How many anticipated hookups are we looking at?
Right now there are like 15 confirmed.
There's 60 properties in
Yeah,
there?
just over 60 properties altogether.
And
And
those-
actually, we haven't sent out notices yet. I just sent out a notice today for another like 5 blocks. So we still got a couple of major streets to go yet. So
And eventually they'll all be connected. It's just going to be a matter of time.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Trustee Pompo?
Nothing other than, did you say 55-0 or 15? I'm sorry. What,
That are confirmed to hook up. Yeah, I think it's like 15, and those are the ones that have already contracted with Obastar, and then there's some more that are not contracted with Obastar that I don't know about.
Right. Okay.
And I got a call yesterday from a person I've never even heard of before, who was going to be hooking up. So can't say for sure. It may end up being 20, 25.
Pete?
The only question I didn't ask you in the last couple of days is, on their grinders that we repair, how are they holding up, Kirk?
They hold up pretty well. There are, I mean, obviously there's some things that happened. It's the main problems we'll get is everything operates off a sensor, and you know, it might get plugged, or you know, and again, it depends on there are lots of different variables. We seem to have problems with old guys that use very little water. You know, it's funny that the women use more water than the men do. But,
Washing our hair.
But we're not getting any callbacks of after we repair them because of, you know, the age of them, and just fix it up a couple parts.
not
Are
usually. We
going
have
right
had
through?
callbacks and for something different happening, but.
Are you,
But it's definitely a good pump. I mean, it's basically the best pump in our application. This actually, to digress a little bit, this pump was actually developed through EPA grants.
have they changed the technology in the pumping?
The basic technology is the same. What's changed is these sensors I was talking about. They used to be like basically air tubes, okay, so it's just sensing pressure. Now it's gone to, it's like solid state, so it's still a tube, but it's got like little solid state devices that are, I guess another change has been the material.
And the only thing we have to do is go back and flush those out, your grinders and that.
Well, what we do is we just pull the pump, take it back to the shop,
Yeah, okay.
and replace it, so we're not working the field, you know, just take it back to the shop.
That's it, Dennis.
Okay.
Sometimes we have to rebuild the motor, replace stators, you know, that sort of stuff.
Kirk, you requested, you know, the additional service worker or two in your budget request, and the one thing that you discussed was that you fall behind in maintenance, and we addressed it a little bit with water, but I want you to address it specifically with wastewater. What types of maintenance items? Are there any things you have particular concerns with that we may or may not be keeping up with on a scheduled maintenance?
Okay, well, it's basically the same type of situation, and I didn't mean to imply that things aren't getting done.
Right.
All I'm saying is the routine annual type stuff that really should be done every year is not getting completely done. So I'd just like to enhance our capabilities, you know, to get more things done. That's all I'm saying. But it's similar, basically the same type of stuff. Valve operation, just operating valves, you know, and that's something that basically is not getting done. That because they're just mechanical devices. You know, if you leave a valve open for years, okay, then you need to go close it. Sometimes it won't close. Sometimes when it does close, it'll break. So it just needs to be operated, you know, to keep it movable, operable. A big one in the sewer is we just sewer cleaning. Okay, we're basically keeping up with the, you know, we've kind of isolated some spots that we know are trouble. Okay, so we try to get those done. But these pressure sewers that we're installing, and we already have a lot of them, and now we're going to have, even more. It's just actually flushing out. These are small diameter mains, and the grinder basically grinds up the sewage, so that you got water and you got solid matter and all kinds of material. It just gets ground up together, so you end up with like a slurry. Okay. So sewers, you're supposed to have, a certain velocity. Well, the way these small diameter sewers work is each individual grinder powers that main. So if you got 100% of your pumps connected, okay, you're probably going to be okay. But if you don't, that means that you've got there's more potential for blockages, okay, because you don't have, what happens is somebody's using water, it'll move up a few feet, okay, when their pump is on. If it goes for long enough, this stuff will, congeal or whatever, and, it just needs more cleaning, okay. Well, it's a little bit more difficult in these pressure sewers because you actually have to, it's a different material, first of all, small diameter. So we've actually got cleanouts that, again, have valves on them, and it basically just has to be flushed. Another thing is we've got air relief valves. Okay, so every high point, as your main goes up and down, okay, it's got an air relief valve. And that's kind of a simple device. It's just a chamber with like just a valve, okay. What it does is it releases air. So when you start pumping, if you don't have, it's like trying to pour water out of a water jug, if you don't have the vent cap open, okay. So it's harder on the pumps. It pumps less effectively. And the same thing, these are actually air vacuum valves, combination valves. So when you do pump, you don't create a vacuum. So to release a vacuum, it also will expel air. So, and those tend to get plugged as well. So, and the maintenance of those is, again, flushing. And we've got lots of these, several, per block, or maybe one per block, depending on the situation. And that's the kind of stuff that there just doesn't seem to be time for.
Thank you.
I mean, there's time, obviously, but there's not
Right. Not what you'd like it to
people
be.
inhabiting that time.
Right. I know we're bumping up, and I know Ernie has to be somewhere at 6 o'clock. I see that our crew is in here that is going to be doing the road rehab plan meeting at 6 o'clock in this room. So if it's okay with the board, I think that we should wrap up where we're at. Everybody went through one time, and when we pick back up again on Tuesday, we'll pick back up with wastewater and see if there's any follow-up questions from anyone with the board, or if Kirk wants to add anything at that point, but on our forum discussion on Tuesday. And with that, we'll close the work session. Thank you.